Zack Snyder's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead absolutely rules. And here's a few reasons why. What's up, everybody? I'm Brad. Welcome back to Let's Talk Movies. And when producers Eric Newman and Marc conceived the idea of remaking George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead from 1978, they envisioned it as more of a reimagining of the original film rather than a beat-by-beat remake. I mean, how do you remake a film that is that influential to its genre and so beloved amongst horror fans and zombie fans alike without completely missing the mark? You pay tribute to what came before, in essence, while reimagining what the story can be. Then you hire James Gunn to pen your script, because I can't lie, that's a pretty good thing in and of itself. I mean, look at the success of Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy 3 over the last couple of weeks. I mean, the dude knows what he's doing. In a 2004 interview, James Gunn actually described the remake of Dawn of the Dead as a sort of story about redemption. I think that in the end, Dawn of the Dead is about redemption because it's about a bunch of people who have lived certain lives, who have maybe not been the best of people, and suddenly they have everything that they've used to define themselves. Their careers, their churches, their jobs, their families are stripped away. They're gone. They start at nothing and they have to become who they really are in the face of all of that. And some of the people are redeemed and end up becoming good people, and some of them are not redeemed and they end up, not redeemed. And that's what kind of drove me throughout the story, was it was a story about redemption. And that's one of the things that makes the zombie subgenre so fascinating to me, is that you have these people that would have otherwise had nothing to do with each other, but under these nightmarish circumstances are thrown together in the worst types of ways, and they become so vital to each other's well-being and survival. I mean, look at The Walking Dead, look at The Last of Us. These types of stories are really captivating, and the fact that they can bring people together in really, really cool and exciting ways leads to really, really awesome character development throughout the show or movie or TV series. And there are many things that make Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead film from 2004 a really, really great remake, perhaps one of horror's best remakes, but I wanted to highlight three of them. Number one, it is extremely bold. Zack Snyder was pretty bold for choosing Dawn of the Dead to be the first feature film that he ever directed. The original Dawn is such a beloved film. Many would argue that it is maybe in the top 10 most influential horror movies ever made, maybe even one of the most influential movies ever made. Yet he chose to make things his own. He didn't create a carbon copy of George Romero's original film, shot for shot, beat by beat. So this remake, or reimagining as it was envisioned by the producers and by James Gunn, hits some of the same concepts, but it also stands on its own. The material can stand on its own. The characters can stand on its own. The direction and the tone of this story stands in its own. It doesn't have to stand in the shadow of the original film. This movie is good, even without the original film. The running zombies were actually an incredibly inventive touch on his part as well. I know that many people would side with George Romero on the zombies don't run thing. I actually don't. I'm very lenient on what a zombie can be. Now, again, within reason, I think it should hit along the same beats and the same ideas as what George Romero originally envisioned. But the zombie subgenre, to me, can encapsulate a very wide variety of undead creatures. It's the same argument I have with 28 Days Later. Many don't believe that 28 Days Later is a zombie film. I think 28 Days Later is one of the scariest and one of the greatest zombie films ever made. And I think it relates more to the Romero stuff than people give it credit for. So I think zombies can walk. I think zombies can run. I think it was bold of him to try and do something different. It still hits the infection angle. It still hits on the different society angles and kind of watching society crumble and that whole idea of that social commentary that's in there. But I think it was bold of him to do something different with the zombies. You have to reinvent it for the 21st century. You have to make it scarier. You have to do something with the actual creatures themselves. And I thought choosing them or making the decision for them to run was actually really cool on Zack Snyder's part. I like that this story stands on its own. It pays homage to what came before. We get to see how the different characters kind of interact with each other in the mall. We get to see how society kind of collapses. It's a much larger cast of characters than in the original film, which I think really works for this. I've always loved our introduction to Anna and to her husband. Even though it's brief, we get a sense of they live in this really nice neighborhood and they have a nice relationship with the little girl next door. They know their neighbors and they have barbecues together and things like that. And it's a little community of tight-knit people that they've got there. And that really kind of contrasts when things start to go bad. When we see it all in chaos and bloody disarray, it kind of makes you realize as an audience member, like, holy crap, there are actual stakes here. And it works really, really well for our characters. Number 2, Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is a fun movie. While Dawn of the Dead delivers on the horror side of things with some great gags, fun scares, and it's even got some zombie-fueled adrenaline, it's still got comedic elements to it as well. From a topless zombie aimlessly walking past Anna's car to the survivors trying to have a good time inside the Crossroads Mall, it still takes time for comic relief. The movie is really, really well done and well written, and while it does play things super serious in terms of the outbreak and the apocalyptic angle, there are still moments that kind of make us as audience members chuckle a little bit, whether that's, the nude zombie walking by Anna's car as she's watching 2 people get ripped apart inside of the bus, or it's 2 survivors making a sex tape inside of the mall, or finding ways to keep their minds occupied and them occupied in the mall when they're kind of waiting from the point that the outbreak begins to the point that they actually escape from Crossroads. There are very fun moments within this movie. Even though it takes itself seriously, it does pause at times to make you laugh and to make you have fun as you're watching it. It's a very fun film. And these are the kinds of things that make the zombie subgenre so much fun in the first place. This situation isn't centered around one group of characters from one area and one killer like a slasher or like a thriller would be. This is happening everywhere. This is a global thing. There are moments of stillness mixed in with moments of pure chaos. The world that we once knew, it's like it's stopped turning, and that new reality has to kind of set in, this new reality or this new awareness that was born out of the old world. It's really cool to see, and the endless possibility of stories to tell within that reality is what makes the zombie apocalypse subgenre so cool, and I've always loved that about it. While the ending of the original film was changed in the remake, it is an absolute blast. When they're revamping the mall buses to try to cut through they're crafting them into like war machines to try to get them through the army of zombies that are waiting for them outside. I mean, that is so cool. That was such a genius moment on Zack Snyder's part. And you have to give credit where credit is due. James Gunn is an absolute fantastic screenwriter. Without him, we would not have this film. Number 3, it is a great depiction of the zombie apocalypse. We talked about this a little bit with the neighborhood scene, but one of my favorite sequences in the entire film is when Anna is driving through the town and everything is kind of in pure chaos. We see the neighbors being chased by the dead, and the neighbor turning and pointing the gun towards Anna, telling her to get back. Her husband, the man that she just had a very intimate evening with not even 12 hours ago, is running out of their house. He's soaked in blood. He's trying to kill her. Helicopters are flying. Sirens are blaring. There's gunfire. There's running, screaming, emergency personnel scattered everywhere. It's a very chaotic scene, and from her character's perspective, it's something that is very surreal to her. It's such a contrast from when we saw her in the hospital and we saw her driving home and interacting with the husband and the little girl, not even 12 hours before that morning when things kind of went awry. And all of this was foreshadowed in a previous scene when Anna and her husband are in the shower and there's a news bulletin about the outbreak on TV. The fact that they have no idea that this is happening, yet us as audience members do, it just creates this deep sense of dread, and that is so incredibly important to nail the doom and gloom aspect of the outbreak within a zombie story. Another thing that I love is Zack Snyder's use of these wide-angle panoramic shots of the outbreak unfolding. When Anna runs out of her house, we see helicopters making their way towards the city with smoke billowing out of buildings. We hear the chaos around her when she's in the car, and we see the area from above. An out-of-control car strikes the gas station, creates a massive explosion, people running, fleeing from the dead on the ground. Buildings are on fire. It just adds to the overall sense of doom and gloom, the severity of this widespread event that she has just now woken up to. And the moment that she pauses on the road when she's looking up at the bus after she sees the nude chick walk by, and there's somebody being ripped apart inside of the bus by the two zombies. I mean, oh my gosh, that's a surreal moment. That's a gruesome moment. I mean, to watch that happen when you're already in shock for your husband trying to kill you, and this little girl that you know is sweet and you have a relationship with, and everything else going on. I mean, that's a very surreal moment for her character, and that's kind of a moment of like, you can tell she's in shock. She can't believe what she's watching right now. It's hard to believe. I love when Anna and Ving Rhames' character Kenneth meet up with Michael and Andre and his wife for the first time. Michael tells them that they do not want to go that way, that it's pretty bad, and when Kenneth asks how they know it's impossible to get through, their response is, "We just tried back then when there was 8 of us." I mean, whoa, like, that is a chilling line right there. If you've never noticed before, we slowly build the number of zombies that we actually see on screen at one time. We begin with the little girl, then with Anna's husband. For the middle third of the film, we really only see 5-10 zombies at a time, and then of course by the end of the film there's the entire swarm of them outside of the mall, and our survivors have to make their way through the army of them during their escape. Another great moment is when they arrive back at the mall and they're waiting for Steve to open the door right before they make their big escape. They're being chased by the dead, they're running up the stairwell, and there's a moment where the entire horde kind of rounds that last corner in the stairwell, and they pause. And our survivors have their guns pointing at the dead, and the dead kind of pause and look at them, and they're slowly creeping up towards them, almost as if they're aware of the sense of danger and the tension in that moment. It's a big variation on the Romero style, but for whatever reason, it really works for this film. I think that's kind of a fun, cool zombie moment. And there's no real resolution for our characters, especially if you stay through the first half of the credits. We lose most of our survivors in the escape from Crossroads, but then even the ones that we do have at the end face some pretty uncertain circumstances if you stay through the down with the sickness. Even though we end up hopelessly on a boat and then on an island, they just face another horde of the undead when they get wherever they ended up, when they're filming with Steve's camera and things like that. And essentially, it's just kind of this endless cycle. It reflects the reality and the hopelessness of the zombie apocalypse. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, you have to face this. You're gonna be facing this no matter what. And it's that bonding between the characters within this super sad, super violent and nightmarish reality that makes these zombie stories so cool, and it's what makes a film like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead such a great film. I could talk about this one for hours. The original Dawn of the Dead is without a doubt one of the most influential and quintessential films in horror history, and some would even argue in film history, in all of cinema. And it's such a cool moment for the zombie genre where things really started to take off, especially with the practical effects and things like that. And it's definitely cemented itself as being extremely important to the genre. But if you are going to attempt a remake or a reimagining of that film, James Gunn and Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is definitely a really, really, really great way to do it. I've always had a lot of love for this film, and I can't wait to get to it on Purely and Simply Evil, which is our horror show, where we're going to take even a deeper dive into the madness there. Guys, until then, I'm Brad. Thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to leave this one a like and let me know in the comments below what you think of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. Do you prefer the original 1978 film, or do you prefer the 2004 remake? Please let us know. New episodes of our shows premiere every single week at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at LTM Podcast KY. If you haven't joined the official Let's Talk Movies Facebook group, please search for Let's Talk Movies YouTube channel / community page in the Facebook app and join that group. We post new information there. We post updates on the channel. We post the week's upcoming content, things like that. You get your first glimpse. So guys, thank you so much for joining me, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.